Many of you have seen me up here the last 2 days now, introducing sessions. So now I get to introduce my own session. Wow. So, okay. And it's a fascinating topic, and it's also the last session of the day. So we're gonna knock your socks off. So the topic is how a mega deal can drive new value. So I've got two perspectives of how a mega deal can drive new value. We're gonna talk to an enterprise that's part of a mega deal, and we're gonna talk to a service provider that's part of delivering that mega deal, but also what the implications are in a much broader context. So let me invite my panelists up. Come on up. We've got Talia Hanby, who's the head of IIG Participant Services at Vanguard. I will have Talia explain what that means in just a moment. Why don't you go, let's put Satish in the middle.
Perfect.
Why don't you come right here, Satish? And then we have Satish Nair, Senior Vice President and Global Head of Sales at Infosys. So we'll have Satish, why don't you pop in the middle here. Talia, you go on the end.
Sure.
And this is mostly so you don't confuse Talia and myself, because Satish did not get the memo on the cream jacket. So
yeah.
we just want to make
They
sure.
asked me to wear the black one, so
yes,
I think
yes.
I'm good. So.
He's intentionally bifurcating us anyway. Okay, so welcome to HFS, our event here. So what I'd love to do, I just made a commitment to the audience, Talia, where I'd like for you to explain in layperson's terms exactly what IIG Participant Services is, because I know once you say it, everyone's going to say, I get it, or at least the Americans.
Sure, thanks so much. So hi, everyone. Happy to be here today. When I think about what does IIG Participant Services mean? At Vanguard, I oversee the 401k plan, retirement plans, contact center, partner closely with Infosys for the delivery of our participant experience and have oversight of that. So think of contact center, heard a lot about contact centers today, but all aspects of that experience, whether it's through chat, email, service recovery, phone calls. I lead that group at Vanguard.
Superb. And so that IIG Participant Services is, because I know we had a question about B2B earlier today, but Vanguard in your business line is essentially providing retirement services to different enterprises who then provide it to their end users.
Correct.
Is that a fair, okay.
Fair.
See, mastering these topics here. Okay, so in this concept of how a mega deal can drive new value, so Vanguard is involved in one such mega deal. By the HFS definition, a mega deal is typically something, a big deal is maybe 100 million or above. This particular deal is somewhere in the range of $1 billion over X number of years type of thing. But the size is not the point. It's what value can you actually get from it. So we're going to dissect this a little bit. Let's do some baseline. So you're just telling us what IIG Participant Services is. But I want to talk a little bit about your background. You've been part of Vanguard for 21 years. So you know your company, you know the industry inside out. I think it would be helpful to all of us to understand a little bit about some of the Vanguard corporate culture and ultimately what led your firm to want to do this, to say, I want to work with, it so happened to be Infosys, but what led your firm to want to go down this path with a provider? What needed to happen? What was really both the catalyst and what were you hoping to get from it?
Sure. I think one of the key things when you think about Vanguard, I have been there for 21 years, and there's good reason. The culture at Vanguard is one that is just so invested in both our investors as well as our crew, and we call our employees crew. So first and foremost, that's, when you think about culture at Vanguard, they're the two key things that really drive everything that we do. What's important for our investors, though, is providing a high-value service at a cost that is not astronomical and really worth the value. So what led us to this mega deal, as it's been deemed with Infosys, was finding a partner, one that was aligned with us from a cultural perspective. We spent, and I see a lot of them in the audience today, weeks, days, months, not just understanding the business, but understanding the way Infosys runs business, how they treat their employees. What does that look like? What's important to them? And ensuring that we were aligned on the same things. I think the other thing that we came to realize was Vanguard is really good in financial services. We're really good with investments. We can do things from a technology standpoint, but when you think about record-keeping legacy systems, one of the things is they're old, they're antiquated, and they need to be undone, frankly. And how do we get better with that? That wasn't something that we felt we could do ourselves. So we enlisted with what we saw was the best partner to help us do that. And, I'm sure we're going to talk about lots of the benefits that we've seen, but that's how we got there.
Yeah, because it's, honestly, you can talk about I think the journey's always interesting, but what the outcomes are is what it's really all about. So in that description, Talia, part of what I heard was legacy. So you guys, your business, you're in the retirement business. You want to help people manage their wealth so they can retire well. And so, okay, within that though, you've got legacy systems. So it sounds like there was a lot of modernization that needed to happen. So was a big part of this in terms of the whole why of it? Was it to really drive that, dare I say, digital transformation, but certainly transformation? Is that a fair assumption?
I think transformation is the name of the game. I think we would say transformation, modernization was really what we were looking to drive.
Got it, okay. All right, so, keep me honest here. I think you guys are like 2.5 years into this? Okay, so what the heck's happened in the 2.5 years? Tell us a little bit about how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's great. It was a transformation, though, right? Like, this was a big change. It was something, if you asked me 21 years ago when I started at Vanguard, if I thought we would ever do, I don't know that the answer would have been yes. So there was a lot of change that's occurred and a lot that we've seen over the last 2.5 years. But I think, frankly, what we've seen is we've just gotten better as time goes on. We partner very closely together. I think in the beginning, you would see it as Vanguard and Infosys. When I look at things now, much more integrated. When you see us interact, whether it's with plan sponsors from a retirement, you don't know who works at Infosys and you don't know who works at Vanguard. We all work on the Vanguard account. So that's been, for me, one of the greatest things that we've seen out of this.
Gotcha, okay. All right, I dropped that O word a moment ago, outcomes. So 2.5 years in, and so, and actually even before we get to the outcome, so in terms of some of the things that have actually happened at this point, maybe could you give our gang here a flavor for what's actually transpired in that 2.5 years?
Sure, I think one of the biggest things was transforming our call center and the technology we use off of, our on-prem solution and into the cloud. That was huge. Now the tough thing when you do stuff like that is who saw the benefits of that. We certainly feel them internally for things like routing changes that we can do much more nimbly than we could do before, but how does that impact the participant? That comes to, I hate to jump ahead here, but where I would see our biggest outcome so far. So when we transformed ourselves onto the cloud, one of the key things that we were able to do was gain participant sentiment immediately after phone calls. We used to email out a survey. We used to get survey feedback back in, and we would maybe, for the hundreds of thousands of phone calls we took, get 1,200 surveys a month returned to us. We are now at a 30% response rate for surveys that we utilize through our automated system or our IVR network, all because of this transformation that we've made. And that has benefits not just to our plan sponsors and participants. So anyone who led a call center through COVID dealt with the Great Resignation, experienced, I'm sure, high call volumes, long wait times, something that we really weren't used to, frankly. And we typically have a goal of 30-second average speed of answer, and that time was really multiplied throughout the pandemic. But one thing we were able to do because of this data that we had was confidently talk to our plan sponsors that their participants were still getting a great experience. And that was huge because all they were thinking was, we're waiting minutes to have our phone call answered, this isn't good. And we were able to confidently tell them, your plan, your participants are answering a survey. They overall are very satisfied with what we've been doing. We were able to justify this by it's statistically significant because there's large volume of results, and that's not something we were ever able to do before. So key outcome for us, and it benefited not just our plan sponsors and participants. Think about the crew taking those phone calls who now get immediate feedback after the phone call. You hang up your on call, your survey response from that call is there as soon as it's populated from the participants. So huge benefit all around.
Yeah, it's one of those. So again, your business is enabling retirement, but for those employees that you're talking about you're essentially streamlining their ability to provide fantastic service to your direct clients, the participants, and then the downstream, your clients, if you will. So it sounds like significant employee experience benefit
Correct.
as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Satish, it's time to get you into this conversation. So one of the things, I think when we think about these deals and when we talk about what do service providers, strategic partners bring to the mix in a lot of cases, you hear these deals talked about, okay, we're going from CapEx to OpEx. We're gonna magically change your balance sheet. And you're bringing these kinds of deals to life. You're taking this concept I've just mentioned and bringing it to life for lots of different sectors. I'd like you to maybe talk with us a little bit about, within this model, the CapEx to the OpEx, what's the role of business process management? This is the part of Infosys that you're with. And I'd love you to talk about this in two contexts. One is sort of the value of BPM in these types of engagements to really enable that CapEx to OpEx. And then we should do something cool too. We should talk about industry BPM, because I don't feel like people think that exists out there. It's all F&A, even contact center. That's the same in every sector, right? Oh my goodness, no. But okay, you tell us.
Let me kind of flip that around.
Please.
To, talk about where is it that we see, and I believe that a lot of service providers are seeing in terms of industry BPM, right? While retirement services is a classic example, and I'm going to break it into three parts. Financial services has been far ahead of the curve, right? Be it insurance, be it mortgages, be it now retirement services with Infosys, right? You're starting to see core domain-based platforms coming through. There is a second dimension, and we are seeing a huge growth path, for example, for a retailer in Europe, where for a large deal, right, 70% of that value was actually around merchandising, where we are actually putting together, true multi-channel merchandising and merchandising support, including for stores across the board. Now, for that, obviously, it means that you need to understand the domain, right? You just cannot do that, right? And the third part of services that you're seeing, and by the way, this extended not just in retail, but in manufacturing, where you're starting to see plants and what you truly need to get into the, what can be done for a plant, right, in the manufacturing world, right, or in telco, right, where you truly understand the domain, and this goes beyond just customer service into core processes, right? So, and the third type of deals where we are seeing what we call as industry services is traditional enterprise services aligned to an industry knowledge. I mean, take a look at CPG and you look at areas like deduction, you really are seeing the concept of understanding of the domain and industry into these services, right, and beyond just enterprise services. Now, coming to the second part, and let's face it, all of these large deals from CapEx to OpEx, which traditionally become large platform deals, right, they're typically integrated deals, right, because there is nothing that says today is just BPM and today is just IT. I think it's a question of how all of this come together through the eyes of the business, right, and say, hey, listen, if I'm running a retirements platform, it's not just that I bring in IT, it's not just that I bring in processes, it's the understanding of where that business is actually headed, right? For example, in the retail CPG value chain, right, the ability for us to get that platform meant that you're addressing a very different market, right? A lot of CPG companies struggle with even understanding visibility of the end retailer demand, right, on what's really going on there, right? A platform truly enables that kind of a model, right? So we are seeing the combination of domain, the bringing together of IT processes with that business understanding, right, and creation of a very different, unique value proposition that combines not just the productivity and cost part, but also the experience and the effectiveness of what comes out, right? So.
Yeah, indeed. All right, I appreciate that answer. And also within that, so I had asked about industry business process management, but it also made me reflect on even, Talia, in terms of how you described the relationship that Vanguard has with Infosys. You didn't say BPO or IT, but you referenced their different domains and how they mostly have to work together to do what the heck you need. But that's why I always love the business perspective, because you're talking about, again, what are you achieving and what outcomes are you actually getting? Okay, all right, Satish, I've got another one for you because in this sort of CapEx to OpEx discussion, and so much of what I think the BPM discussion is perhaps overly so, is what's everyone's number one cost objective, or if not what's everyone's number one objective for these engagements? Number one or number two, occasionally number three, is cost. It just depends on, I would argue, it depends on what the macroeconomic circumstance is at any given time to really dictate like where cost is in the list, but it's always there. So with that in mind, what are you guys doing to help hit on the cost management, cost savings, cost, like people want to couch it as productivity sometimes, to help manage to the cost lever? But the other reality is, and this is kind of where the cost is either 1, 2, or possibly 3, increasingly clients want it as, yes, there's a cost lever, but it's cost and. How do you manage to that?
So it's an interesting one because cost is not going away, right? I mean, everybody's going to talk about it, it's there. So we are working with a high-tech company. And the value proposition there was, how do you even address a completely different market base because your unit cost economics play out, your scalability plays out, but more importantly, your ability to innovate makes that organization address a very, very different market, which they could not. Now, think about it from that market perspective. It was underserved, customer experience was so-so because they did not have a model to even support that market. Yeah. Right? And suddenly you have this whole model that allows you, number one, to be able to address it at a cost-effective manner, address that market and every consumer in that particular segment, right? You're also talking about how do you keep, and you can't do this just in the current model, right? I mean, you just can't throw people at it, right? So it is a platform plus digital ability, and for that customer, it means additional revenue, underserved market, and hugely fantastic customer experience at the outcome of it, right? So cost is fair, but once you come up with these kind of models, it allows you to, truly start impacting the customer's business directly, right? Because you're addressing these models.
Well, yeah, you do have to do that baseline. We hear some providers talk about how what you're enabling for your clients is you can generate the cost savings to fund the transformation. I never actually really believe that, but you tell me, is it possible?
The whole concept of funding the future, we called it sometimes. I was at a customer and I was asking them, why do you have such a diverse landscape? They still had mainframes plus some client server something and something else. And they said, Satish, in the last 10 years, the best result I've got from prioritizing my IT landscape is I got down to number 172 in the CIO's priority list in the last 10 years. I'm sure that was a joke. He must have come up to 10, but 10 also doesn't get you into the table for the next year, right? So in some sense, your ability for us to be able to keep you relevant, right? The ability for us to keep these business processes relevant, because for that team that is running the platform, you are priority number 1 and period.
Yeah.
That's it. Then how do you truly look at driving that kind of an innovation and be able to, be relevant to what you decide as a function, you decide as an organization and broader? I think that kind of makes a lot of sense.
Indeed. Talia, I'm wondering from your perspective at Vanguard, so we can talk cost and cost plus other business objective or metric, but the ability to help keep you relevant, does that resonate with you? Like when you think about what were you after, like I'm not sure you ever couched it that way, because I'm very sure, you tell us though, but you're after cost in some element, but cost and relevancy, is that applicable?
I think it's very fair. I think just like everyone, cost is top of mind, right? And you want to make sure that you can do things in a cost-effective way, but you still need to deliver with excellence. So I think we all agree, we're all smart people in this room, you can cut cost, right? All of us can come up with 10 ways we can cut cost right now. But how do you cut cost and still deliver to your customers, a great experience? You couple that with how do we stay relevant, right? In the retirement industry, with financial services industry, there's so much happening right now. And when you think about how do we stay relevant, we can't stay status quo. We can't rest on our laurels of we're a really good investment company and we can talk to you about your investments and you're going to get good returns. If we don't have the technology or the platforms that are going to help enable participants to drive to action, it's going to be a problem. So relevancy is super important.
So thank you for letting me focus on that specific term a bit, because this session we're talking about a mega deal driving new value. So the context on one hand is the new value for the customer, in this case Vanguard. But I would also state that I think the bigger picture is how to drive additional value for the industry. So in this context, within the retirement sector, so obviously Infosys and Vanguard are working together, but there's also been, you've worked together to create a retirement center of excellence. And so now some of these best practices and capabilities are being brought to benefit the broader industry. We would tend to, the terminology we like to use for that at HFS is that it's essentially creating a broader ecosystem and benefit to the ecosystem. And our definition of ecosystem is unrelated entities working together to drive new value. And so with that in mind, when you think about maybe some of the new forms of value being brought to retirement, I mean, any examples that come to mind, or just ways that retirement is getting improved?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the way with which we all work together, right? Every single retirement provider, financial institution, you cross paths. And when you think about participant experiences, they can be very segmented, and they can feel like, I have to go here to do this, I have to go here to do that. What this partnership has enabled is more of that omni-channel, end-to-end participant experience. And I think as we continue to build out the Retirement Center for Excellence, you're gonna see that through the technology and through the process improvements that we're making.
Yeah, indeed. And I would say, so as an American with a 401k, I'm clearly not retired as of yet, but in terms of the mechanics of how my various accounts and such have been managed, I gotta say, I haven't seen a hell of a lot of variation, differentiation, anything for the perhaps more decades that I'd like to admit that I've been storing this up. So to that point, ripe for change, what kind of innovation can we drive here? Satish, what I'd love you to weigh in on is, because you bring a broader industry perspective, what are some of the other opportunities that you see for this ecosystem creation, and any particular sectors that may be ripe for some disruption, or dare we say improvement? What do you think?
Sectors ripe, I think clearly supply chain. I mean, I know we spoke about it earlier. I started my career in supply chain probably a couple of decades back, and some of us are talking about it. And you realize that over 2 decades, yes, things seem to have moved, but what is really shown right now is there's still a lot of ways to go, right? And I think if you take a step back, and I look at one of the things that we were doing in this incidentally happens to be in the Asia Pacific region, right, where we actually have multiple, about 20, 25 of the manufacturers, right, collaborating with key suppliers on the other end on a common platform, right? What it has done is, besides the unit cost economics and how it actually plays out, it's provided a very different level of experience that the individual players could not provide, because the innovation that goes into the platform, the responsibility lies with the provider. I think for most providers, I know a lot of providers have these platforms, what it is also doing is allowing for that innovation, the thinking power, horsepower come and play and impact a significant number of players at any given point of time. This cannot happen without the ecosystem coming in play. I think the larger ERP plays and whatever has happened in IT has done a fabulous job of, within the 4 boundaries of the organization, they've done a fantastic job. I mean, they continue to upgrade, they continue to focus. But for truly areas like supply chain, and it's not just that, right? I mean, I think we need to learn from some of the other industries, and financial services, I mean, capital markets and financial services has done a great job, right? How do you look at organizations to look beyond those boundaries, especially in supply chain? There's so many different actors, bring them onto a platform, provide that kind of an experience, be responsible, and in some sense for providers to be responsible for driving that innovation, bringing this whole ecosystem together, right, and driving change, which combines your digital and combines a clear understanding of the domain, because you really need to understand the end-to-end industry value chain, and obviously bringing in the entire digital ecosystem together, right? So I think that's the direction, I guess, for a lot of us, and that's where I think where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, indeed. So I appreciate as well, it's not a specific industry example, but necessarily cross-industry. 30 seconds on one point that was within your response there, and you've mentioned it a couple of times, platforms. what's the role of platforms? And the CapEx to OpEx element comes back here, but what's the implication in terms of enablement? Why platforms?
See, I think the cost part is a given, right? I mean, I think the CapEx to OpEx part is completely given. But what I think people are missing is for you to be relevant, right, within some of these areas for extended periods of time, where the responsibility lies with a provider whose day business is in making sure that you're relevant and you're driving that innovation for extended periods of time, right? The second is, once we started looking at these platforms, and be it in financial services or non-financial services, how do you keep up with what the business requires, right? For example, I was talking about the whole, the edge platforms that we built on the retail CPG value chain. Our ability to adapt to a very different operating model where probably e-commerce is actually, driving growth. The responsibility of driving that across this whole set of customers is here, right? So your ability to adapt to business requirements or business changes. I mean, and when I say business requirements, not in terms of what I need today, but overall large-scale business changes, it becomes much better because you're controlling it. You have this whole ecosystem working to make it successful, right? And in my mind, last but not the least, and I love to look at what it means for talent, your ability to start predicting. I'm not looking at 20 different application landscape that I'm training in, or 20 different business processes. Able to scale up becomes fantastically better.
Yeah, so it's CapEx to OpEx to innovation. Okay, all right, I know we're out of time, but I do just want to, we cannot miss the opportunity to let you guys ask any questions. Oh, we've got one right here.
So Infosys has run multiple mega deals in the past, but this was little different because it happened in the middle of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. So how did you make the transition work?
Actually, fantastic question. I mean, I think for me, the big credit that I give is what I call as learnability, right? And your ability to adapt to a situation. At the middle of the pandemic, this was just one, but across all of this, meant that you had to relearn, unlearn, relearn your traditional transition models, your people engagement models. How do you do change management? And everything remote. And what I think the team showcased, and by the way, it's not just about Infosys, but I think the world showcased is how do you learn and adapt to these kind of fundamental changes that are actually, I think credit goes to just the human potential to be able to adapt, right? And I think I'm wondering when generative AI will actually catch up to that quick adapt
I was going to say,
change part of it.
You just killed me, Satish. So I was going to literally say, we got through this whole session without saying generative AI. Okay,
I have to say it because
Talia, just 30 seconds, just weigh in on that point because you lived through it. What was it like doing this during the pandemic? It's a fantastic question.
Lived through it, went back and forth on if we were going to do it while we were in the pandemic and at home, because you think about so much of that change and what it looked like, and you relied on those relationships and sitting down and talking to people and telling them about what this all meant. And it was the first time Vanguard had done anything like this. So to your point, we had to get real good with technology and being able to communicate, show empathy, change management, what this all looked like when you couldn't be right there with someone. Okay. But it was the partnership that made it work, truthfully. We talked about it for weeks, months, as we, once we got to March of 2022, and we decided to still go forward with it.
That whole concept of what trust means, right?
Yeah.
I think really gets tested at these kind of
serious
situations.
Okay. So let's do this. We're gonna push any final questions or go into drinks. I'm sorry, Neeraj, man, we're pushing it to drinks. But what we need is, all right, for anyone considering transformation, it doesn't have to be a mega deal, but can you give one actionable recommendation to this gang here? Talia, let's start with you.
Yeah, the big thing for me is understanding that you don't go from 0 to 100 overnight. Yeah. And when you're doing a transformation of this size, you have to understand that there's going to be incremental small wins along the way. And you need to celebrate them because your clients, as well as your crew, are going to be looking for where's the end result. So I think the one thing we learned really early on is celebrate the small incremental wins that may not be visible to everyone, right? Like moving fully to the cloud from a call center perspective, but talk about what that did to build the foundation for where we're going.
Fantastic, thank you. Satish?
In my mind, I think all of these programs has a fundamental impact as long as we understand it as a large long-term impact on the businesses that we are actually running, right? And as long as you're making sure that you're keeping that as a key focus area, be it understanding your long-term, what does it mean? What does it mean for you to, do I really understand where that business is going, right? Please take that time to understand the long-term business roadmap. What could be the areas that you need to impact? How can you really make that change over reasonably extended periods of time and looking beyond the tip of my nose, right? I think I would really encourage people to drive that.
Yeah, and I would say just pulling that thread through, looking beyond the tip of your nose, so you drive the value for the enterprises involved, you drive the value for the broader industry where you can. Okay, with that, please join me in thanking my fantastic panel. Thank you.